Today's Talk About It Tuesday question is, if a couple is considering getting married, what type of discussion about finances should they have first? Boy, oh boy, do I wish somebody had advised me before I got married. I got married relatively young, according to today's standards, in my 20s, and had no clue about finances or what questions to ask my wife. And so we kind of stumbled along together very young with no clue and made a lot of mistakes before we got things right. So I put a lot of thought into what questions should be asked, and I came up with a long list of questions. So, I don't usually go from notes, but I wrote some things down because I don't want to forget any of these things, because I think every single one of these questions is very important. And I kind of broke it down into three parts, right? I think you should ask questions about their past in order to establish what patterns they have and see their growth on their financial journey. Ask questions about their present so you know the current condition that you're marrying into. And then ask questions about the future to see their vision for handling finances and financial issues after you're married. So I think we start off, if we talk about the past, what is the largest debt that they have ever incurred, and what was it on, and how did they handle it, right? And so if they say, I spent, I don't know, $100,000 on a car, it gives you an idea of where their values and priorities were at the moment. It doesn't mean that's where they're at now. And how did they handle that debt? So were they able to save money? Did they work extra to pay it off? Were they not able to pay it off? Were they behind on payments? Like, those things matter because, again, that's part of people's financial growth and education. And again, you see, patterns of growth. I think you should ask what they feel their biggest financial error was, because we all have, again, in the beginning, made mistakes. What was your biggest financial error? How did that happen, and what did you learn from it? That's important. Then let's turn it to the other side. What was the best financial decision you think you ever made? Why did you do it, and what did you learn from that? I think you should ask if they have ever been sued over a debt. It's important. So what was the outcome of the lawsuit? Do they have judgments against them? Are there any liens against anything that they have? I think it's important to ask, have they ever filed for bankruptcy? How long ago was that? How is that impacting what they're doing now? So I think those are important. Let me see if I wrote down anything else for past. I think gives you a good idea of their starting point. You can ask about their financial education. Did their parents help them learn about finances, and what's their condition? Because that's important. Sometimes you see familial patterns. If the parents didn't know much about money, then the kids tend not to know a lot about money. If the parents made certain mistakes, sometimes the kids learn from it and don't make the mistakes, but sometimes they follow in the same pattern. So getting a clear understanding of their past and their progression up to the present. So when we talk about the present, I think you need to get a clear understanding of what their current income is from all sources, right? Your job, maybe you have investments, maybe your parents are helping you out, maybe you're in a previous marriage and you get spousal support or child support. What is your total income, and where is it coming from? And how will that change once you get married, right? If your parents are helping you out, is that going to stop, right? So all sources of income, what is it? Then how much savings do you have? Do you have an emergency fund? Did you consider that? What type of investments do you have? Do you have life insurance currently? What's your credit score? How did it get that way? How much debt do you currently have? And how are you managing that? What are your current expenses? And are you able to pay everything in full on time? What are your spending patterns? What do you do with your expendable cash? Right? Do you like to buy material things? Do you like certain experiences? And what do those things cost? Do you have a retirement plan? Right? So I think having that understanding is important of where they're at currently, and then you look at where they were in the past and see how those things relate. Have they grown? Is it exactly the same? Have they regressed? Have they actually gone backwards? That's important. So I think then the discussion moves to the future, right? So when you get married, if you're both coming in with assets, or one of you is coming in with assets currently, premarital, do you want to have a prenuptial agreement that says, hey, this, if we don't make it, this is mine. This is not something I want to divide up or something I want to share. It could be an inheritance that's important to you, or you just worked hard for it, and your spouse or soon-to-be spouse didn't contribute to that, and you just want to hang on to that if things don't work out. And don't get caught up in you're setting yourself up for failure. Nobody gets married with the expectation of being divorced, but it happens at least 50% of the time. So it's just a reality. So are you going to, instead of doing a prenup, are you going to suddenly just commingle all assets? Are they going to become joint assets and we share in that? I think you should talk about how you're going to handle the bills, right? Are you going to split the bills and you handle your income, I handle mine, and you're responsible for this, I'm responsible for this? Or are you going to pool a certain amount of your income to cover the bills, and then who's going to be in charge of that? That's important. Are you going to have some of your own discretionary money, have my own? Are we going to, again, make a pool and divide the discretionary money evenly? How are you going to handle that? If there's how are you going to handle savings and investing? Who's going to be in charge of that? Are you comfortable seeking financial advice? And from what sources, right? If you only want to listen to family and friends and not listen to a professional, that you need to know that, right? That's important to know. Let me see, what else did I have down here? How do you plan to deal with future spending? Do you plan to have children? And what type of things do you see for your children? Do you see private school and piano lessons and sports, and you're paying for their college? You want to pay for their wedding? All that has to be planned for if that's what you want. How many kids do you plan to have? And then what are you going to do when you hit that number to ensure that you don't have more? Elder care, something we don't consider, but you probably must consider. So are you going to be the child that's responsible for that, or at least part of that, taking care of your parents at a certain point in your life? And that's hopefully way, way down the road, but it's a shocker when it hits you when you didn't plan for that. How do you want to buy a house, and how do you plan to save for that? Do you big purchases? How are you going to handle major purchases? A car, vacations, certain material items. How are you going to deal with that? Furniture. Are you going to have set aside money for that, or how are you going to handle that? I think it's important to discuss insurance, right? How are you going to deal with life insurance? How much are you going to have? That's important. Making sure to have a discussion about any type of investments that currently exist, or retirement plans that to add this person as a beneficiary, your spouse as a beneficiary. That's important, so that if something happens to you, that money goes to them. How are you going to handle retirement? Are you going to start saving immediately? Do you have a plan for that? What's your retirement looking like? So I think those give you a general guideline of questions that you should ask. And let me say this. If you're already married and you haven't had that discussion, it's still time. I think you should have that discussion, because still a lot of those things are imminent. They're going to happen. If you don't have children already and you plan to have children, you're going to have to. Or if you have children already and haven't discussed, okay, how are we going to handle college? Are we going to contribute to their wedding when they get married? Are we going to contribute to other things that they want to do? That discussion has to happen. Same thing with elder care. Same thing with retirement. Same thing with an emergency fund and all the insurances that you might want to have. All those discussions still should be had. And if things aren't going well in terms of the money management, the day-to-day, a discussion should be had about that. A discussion still should be had about seeking financial advice and from what source. So even though those questions are extremely important prior to marriage, those discussions still should be had during marriage and revisited throughout different stages of your marriage. So I'd love to hear what other questions you think should be asked to your partner. Please like, share, subscribe, keep the questions coming, and I'll see you next Tuesday.